Today's daf is Yevamos daf Chaf Hey. We are at the two dots in the middle of daf Chaf Daled Amud Beis, hanit'an al eshes ish v'chulu. Today's daf is being learned as a schus refuah shalema for Avahu ben Miriam Leah, Moshe Abba ben Devorah bas Mechel, Shmu ben Tehila, Elazar lipa Shalom ben Feger Rachel, Sarah Nechama bas Rus Malka, Baruch ben Rachel, Yisachar ben Hindel Liba, Malka Miriam bas Esther, Shlomo ben Rachel Devorah, and Esther Kreindel bas Devorah. Today's daf is also being learned Le'ilu Nishmas Shol Yecheskel ben Eliyahu. So yesterday we began a Mishnah on the top of daf Chav Daled Amud Beis, which digressed a little bit from the sugyas in the Masechtas Yevamos. The Mishnah discussed someone that is chashud that he was mizana with a woman. Then he wants to marry this woman. What's the halach? Says the Mishnah, hanit'an ala shifcha. If somebody was chashud that he did an avera with a shifcha knanis or with an oivedes keichav, and then the shifcha knanis was freed, or the oivedes keichavim was megayer, so that now this person's in a position that, in theory, if he wanted to, he could do chuppah v'kedushin, kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. Says the Mishnah, lo yichnois, lechatchila, he should not marry this woman. The imkines and b'di'evet, if he marries her, we allow them to stay married. After a little bit of a discussion in the Gemara said that the reason we tell this person not to get married, lechatchila, is being that right now there's rumors circulating that this person had an illicit relationship with this woman. If he's going to marry her now, all it's going to do is give credibility to the rumor. And the pasuk says, Shlomo Melech said it, B'roiv Chachmasai in Mishlei Perek Dalet, Haser Mimcha Ikshus Peh, Ulezus Sifasayim Harchek Mimecho, that a person's supposed to behave in a way where people are not going to suspect him of doing something wrong. So by this man marrying this woman now, it certainly gives a raglayim l'davar that what they're accusing him of having done actually happened. And as a result, the Mishnah says, don't get married. Now, what happens b'di'evet if he got married? B'seder, he might see the other. But l'chatchila, it's not something that he's supposed to do. The Mishnah continued, and the Mishnah said, what would happen if somebody was chashud that he did an aver with an eshes ish? And then this eshes ish was divorced from her husband. The halacha is, again, lo yichnois. This man is not allowed to marry this woman. And here the Mishnah says that afal pishakines, that if b'di'evet he marries her yoitzi, the halacha is he would have to give her a get. So in the first part of the Mishnah, hareza lo yichnois, but the imkines ein moitzi miyadai. In the second part of the Mishnah, hareza lo yichnois, but afal pishakines, b'di'evet, if he would marry her, the halacha would be yoitzi. He would have to give her a get. The first part of today's daf is going to discuss the seifa of the Mishnah. Hanit'an al eshes ish v'hotziyua mitachas yadai afal pi shekines yoitzi. And the Gemara begins with a statement that was made by the great Amor Rav. Rav said that this halacha, the Mishnah that says that if somebody is chashud that he was mizana with an eshes ish, and then the eshes ish's husband divorced her, now he married her. The halacha is he wasn't supposed to do l'katchila, and even b'di'evet, now that he did it, yoitzi has to give her a get. That's only true be'edim. If there were actually edim that saw that this man was mizana with this eshes ish, meaning it wasn't just a rumor. It wasn't just a nitan, like Rashi says in the Mishnah, toyan in all of divrei las, but rather this person was actually implicated because two Adam stepped forward and they said that we actually saw this nos. We know that this person did an avera. Over there, says Rav, the halacha is that even if he marries her b'di'evet, he has to give her a get. And the reason is because an eshes ish, that's mizana, birotzoin, tachas bailo. The halacha is she's not allowed to live with her husband. And Chazal said, kishem shasur l'baal, kach asur l'boil. So she's also not allowed to live together with the boil. So being that this man is the boil, and there are Edom that saw this most take place, and for that reason, Yoitzi, he would have no choice, he would have to give her a get. Rav Sheshes, what Rav said, and he commented, he said, Amino, I hold kinai v'shach of Rav, amalahai shmaitza. Rav must have said this while he was falling asleep. Meaning because it's not possible that that's Pshat in the Mishnah. How do I know that? I know it from a brisa. So we know in our Chabura that very often there are brises that say the same thing that Mishnayos say, however, with extra phrases, extra words, extra caveats, and very often it sheds a lot of color on a Mishnah that would otherwise be sasam. So said Rav Sheshes that in the Mishnah itself, I have no problem hearing what it is that Rav said. Rav said maybe the Mishnah is talking about where the person wasn't just a nittan al eishes ish, but they were physically a tuma that said that they saw it, and that's why Afal Pisha kines yoitzi. But Rav Shesha said the problem is it doesn't stem with a price. What's his price at the time? Nittan al eishes ish. Same case. Someone was nittan al eishes ish, and then the husband divorced his wife. And then she went and married somebody else. And then since that second husband also gave her a get. Says the Bryce in Kines, if this man, the Chashud, ends up marrying her, again, she was divorced twice already since the Chshad happened. The original husband gave her a get, and now she married someone else. In the interim, he also gave her a get. So the halach is, in that case, if he would marry her, lo yaitzi, then he'd be allowed to stay married to her. Now, this Bryce is in contrast to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Hanitan al eishes ish, v'itziu mitachas yadoi, afal pishe kines yaitzi." The Brisa says if someone's nittan al eishes ish and he ends up marrying her, what's the halacha? Lo yoitzi. Now, what's the difference between the Mishnah and the Brisa? It's obvious what the difference is. The Brisa is talking about where there was another step. The Brisa is talking about where not only did the husband give her a get, she married somebody else, and that someone else also gave her a get. The Mishnah says in that case, the halacha is lo yoitzi. In other words, if you put the Mishnah and the Brisa together, really it's one big halacha, with the Brisa just adding on to what the Mishnah said, and that is ordinarily if someone's nittan al eishes ish, the husband gives her a get, and then this man, the chashid, marries her. If, however, there was another step, she married someone in between, and that person gave her a get, then the halacha is she'd be able to get married. So it says, and not just that, in kines. Not lechatchila, but b'di'evet in kines lo yoitzi, they'd be able to stay married. So the Gemara says, "Hey chidam, what's the Brisa talking about? Is the Brisa talking about where the person was nittan al eishes ish and they were edim, meaning they were edim that saw the original tumah? They saw this woman be mizana kiyasa acha va'afsake lekala ma'ihava. Then why is it that if this woman, afterwards she was divorced by her husband, married somebody else, and then got divorced again, she's allowed to marry the person that she was chashid from? If there are Edom that saw this nus, that means the chashid is the boil. So the fact that there's another step in between, the fact that she had married someone in the interim should be neither here nor there. Like Edom. Must be there were no Edom, obviously. And that's what the Bryce is saying, that being that she married someone in between, now already she's allowed to be married to the boil. Now, if that's the case, it's clear in the Bryce that the only time the halach is in kines lo yoitzi is if she married someone in between. Had she not married someone in between, mafkinon, then the halach is she would not be able to stay married. It would be in kines yoitzi. So what do you see from the Bryce? So that even if there are no Eidim, but in kines lo yoitzi, the only time in kines yoitzi, the only time it's in kines lo yoitzi is if she married someone in between. But if she didn't marry somebody in between, even if there are no Eidim on the tumah, the halacha is in kines yoitzi. It's not like Rav. Rav said that when it says in the Mishnah nittan al eishes ish, v'itziu mitachas yadoi afal pishe kines yoitzi, that's talking about where there were Eidim. But if there would be no Eidim, then the halacha would be in kines lo yoitzi. From the Brisa you see not that way. Because from the Brisa you see that there's a difference between if she got married to someone in between or if she didn't get married to somebody in between. Now, if there were Eidim that saw this nus, then it doesn't matter if she got married to someone in between. Because even if she did get married to someone in between, so Al Karchach, the Bryce is talking about where there were no Eidim. And the only time she's mutter now to this boil is if she got married to someone in between. Otherwise, she would not be able. So you see that even if there are no Eidim, still it's going to be a problem. Kines lo yoitzi, which is a bomb kasha on Rav, and that's why Rav Shesha said, "Amino kinayim v'shachiv Rav amar lahashmaitz." The Gemara says, "Amar Rav." Rav will tell you, "Who had indafagav to lay asa achav avsakei lekolo ike Eidim afkini leka Eidim loy mafkini." I'll tell you the Brisa that says that if she married someone in between, it's then that the halacha is in kines lo yoitzi is lav daf. Because really, even if she would not have married someone in between, the halacha would be in kines lo yoitzi. If that's the case, so why did the Brisa say it's that in kines lo yoitzi if she married someone in between? Say a bigger chiddush. Even if she didn't marry someone in between, as long as there are no Eidim on the actual tumah, all it is a rumor. The halacha is in kines lo yoitzi v'hachi kamar. Because the Brisa wanted to tell me a different chiddush. The afal got the asa achav avsakei lekolo, that even in a case where she married someone in between, where it's true that if she got married lo yoitzi, but the chiddush is lekatchila lo yichnes. Even then, lekatchila you're not going to be able to get married. So if the Brisa was trying to tell me the biggest chiddush of when it is in the Brisa would have told me the case when she didn't marry someone in between. But that's not what the Brisa's objective is. The Brisa wants to tell me the biggest chiddush of when it's also lechatchila for him to marry her. And that biggest chiddush is that even if she married someone in between, well, you could have thought maybe it's not also lechatchila to get married, it's still going to be also lechatchila to get married. And that's why the Brisa said it the way it said it. So Rav Sheshes asked a bomb kasha on Rav, but Rav deflected the question. But Rav Sheshes asked another kasha. And he said, when is it true? What? The halacha of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Hanittan al eishes ish v'hoitziyuam mitachas yadai." Even if they get married, afal pishakines yoitzi, he has to give a get. Says the Brisa. When is this true? It's true if this woman had no children. But in the event that there were children, like they say, at this point we let them stay married. Meaning, if there was no children, that's when the halacha is loy teitze. But in the event that there's children, so then that's when the halacha is teitze. But in the event that there's children, then already loy teitze. Meaning, you can't just go ahead and tell this woman because she's chashun on eishes ish that she has to be divorced. Because on the one hand, you want to be machmer because of the fact there's a rumor, but then again, she has a family, and what are people going to say about her children? So you're creating major problems. So when you deal with a rumor in halacha, it's not so pashut. It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you want to take it very seriously, but then again, you have to take the family into account. So the Brisa says that when is it true that this is the halacha? Is if there was no bun, if there were no children. But once there's children, then already it's going to be different. Says the Gemara, not the imbo tomo. If the case of the Mishnah was where there were Edom that testified that they actually saw the bia happen, says the Brisa, then it doesn't matter how many children there are going to be, the halacha is always going to be teitze. So what's the kasha? The kasha is that if the Mishnah says afal pishakines yoitzi, and we just said it has to be talking about where then the halacha must be that it's talking about where there were no Edom, because if there was Edei Tumah, then how could the Brisa make a distinction between there being Banim and not being Banim, right? If there's Edei Tumah, then it makes no difference if they're Banim or not. If Edom saw this must happen, then Edom saw this must happen. So from the fact that the Brisa is qualifying the halacha in the Mishnah, and the Brisa is telling me that there's an afkamina if there is Banim or if there's not Banim, then Bal Korchach, it must be talking about where there were no Edom, because if there were Edom, it wouldn't make a difference. So the Gemara says, Rav Moikil Lo Mastis b'yesh lo Banim b'yesh lo Edom. You have to say that Rav Taka learned that the Mishnah is talking about where there were Edom, and because there were Edom on the Tumah, that's why the halacha is af pishakines yoitzne. And Rav is going to add the caveat that the Mishnah was talking about where this couple also had Banim, and because they had Banim, therefore the halacha is Yoitzi, even though there are Edom. Says the Gemara, the Rav. Why would it force Rav to do this? Why did Rav have this doichel to tell me that the Mishnah is talking about where there were Banim, and there were Edom? The time it Edom be like Edom lo. So basically, what Rav is saying is that the reason in our Mishnah the halacha is Yoitzi, it's because there were Banim, and it's for that reason you have to make the Akimta that there were Edom. Look, why didn't you just make an Akimta and say it's talking about where there were no Banim and Afak like Edom? And even if there were no Edom, the halacha is going to be the same. So the Gemara, my Rava said, Masisa said the reason Rav made this Akimta is because there was something bothering him about the Mishnah. Rav was bothered, my iri the Tani Hoitziyua, listening Hoitziyah. Rav had a diak that the Mishnah is mashma a little bit, that after the rumors spread that this Eishesich was Mezana, Bezdin forced this Eishesich to get divorced. The Lashon of the Mishnah is, Anitan al Eishesich, Hoitziyua. It sounds like they forced her to get divorced. It doesn't say Hoitziyah, he punk divorced her. It sounds like they actually forced it to happen. So what was bothering him is why do we pick this lashon? Ela kol oitziyu. So Rav understood that the word oitziyu, the bezdin, is mashma that bezdin must have done it. Bezdin edim with a mafkin. The only time bezdin would ever force someone to get divorced is if they were actually edim. So that's how Rav knew that the Mishnah was talking about edim. Now, if Rav has to make an akimta that the Mishnah is talking about where there were banim beseder, but the bottom line is that Rav held that the Mishnah was talking in a case where there was Edom, and that's why Rav made the Akimta that the Mishnah is talking about where there was Edom. But here's the bottom line. Bottom line is the Mishnah said, Anitan al Eishesish, v'hoitziyua, mitachas yadoi, afa pishakines yoitzi. There's a chshad that this man was mezana with an Eishesish. So the halacha is that if she gets divorced from her husband, and now this man goes and marries her, the halacha is, Yoitzi, he would have to give her again. And Rav made a tremendous akim to the Mishnah. Rav said that the halacha of the Mishnah is talking about where there were Edom that saw this nos. But if there were no Edom that saw this nos, all of this is a rumor, and this man would go ahead and marry this woman, so then the halacha is, he would be able to stay married with her. And Rav Sheshes heard this and he said, Amina, I hold Kinai the Shachar Rav Amud Hashmaita. Rav must have said this while he was falling asleep. Why? Because he had two brises that were not mashma that way. But at the end of the day, the Gemara was miyashiv both brises. The Gemara had teretz for the first brisa, Gemara had teretz for the second brisa, and the Gemara was able to make each one of the brises work. Says the Gemara, Reid Bite is saying, well, maybe you could say another mahalach in the sugi. Meaning, really, the two brises that we just mentioned don't stem with what Rav said. Rav said that the Mishnah is talking about where there were Eidim. The two brises that Rav Sheshes asked from are mashma, that even if there's no Eidim, even if all it is a rumor, the halach is Afal Pishakines Yoitzi. The halach is he's going to have to give her a get. Rav is not like these two brises. How does Rav reconcile? So the Gemara says you could always say Hani Masnaisa Rebbe. Maybe those two brises are going according to Rebbe, and Rebbe, as we're about to see, has a very unique shita when it comes to rumors in the sugya of Arayas. The time we learned to the Brisa, Ruchel Yoitzei. So Ruchel was a peddler. Rashi says specifically he was meicher besamim. He used to sell besamim, like perfumes, lenoshim for women, leskashet b'hem. So what happened is this person, he used to very often, he would drezach with women. And for that reason, you find the different sugyas in Shas that the Ruchel was considered a chashad. He was considered chashad, suspect in areas of Gili Arayas simply because of the fact he would spend time with women. So Ruchel Yoitzei, what happens if a Ruchel came to somebody's house and he's peddling his Zeira, he's selling things, and now he's walking out of the house, and as he's walking out of the house, the woman, the husband of this house, the balabas, walks in. He sees the ruchel leaving, the isha chageres pesina, and he sees his wife is getting dressed. So he's choshed that it looks like something might have happened. So Rebbe said, because clearly what happened over here is mechur. It looks like a raglayim adavar that maybe an avera took place. Teitze, the halach is he has to give her a get. What happens if this man walked into his house? Again, the ruchel was leaving the house, and when he came to the bed, he saw there was some saliva there. Rebbe said, again, it looks like an avera might have happened. So the halacha is he has to give her a get. If again the ruchel was leaving and he walks into the house and he sees underneath the bed there were shoes that were flipped upside down. Rebbe said, the fact that the shoes are flipped upside down, that's also a bad sign. So the Gemara says the first two I understand. What's the sign about that? What's mechur adover? And more, just wanting to see whose shoes they are, so you'll know whether this is something you need to be suspect about. So the Gemara says no. What it means is elam mokim min alayim hafuchim. Rashi has two pshatim what this might have meant, but the bottom is the place where the shoes usually are. They weren't there, or it looks like maybe somebody else's shoes were there. Regardless, he sees the ruchel leaving, and there's some raglayim ledover that maybe something might have happened. So the halacha again is. What Rabbi say? Teitze. He has to give her a get. Now, there's a huge machlokes Rashi places here. What does teitze mean? But ayin sham. But the bottom line is that you see that Rebbe gave tremendous credibility to these types of rumors. That Rebbe is very makbid, right? This idea that a woman loses her whole cheskes kashrus and this woman becomes asal abayla. Why? Because the ruchel was leaving and there was some sin that maybe an avera was taking place. You wouldn't think, based on the ordinary rules and regulations of dinei Torah, that would be enough of a basis. Yet Rebbe holds that it is enough of a basis. Rebbe is very, very makbid when it comes to rumors. So the Gemara says that the Mishnah that says hanittan aleishes ish v'hoitziyu mitachas yadoy afal pishakines yoitzi. Rav understood is talking about where there were Eidim that know for sure she was mezana, and only then is the halacha afal pishakines yoitzi. You have two brises that are mashma not that way. You have two brises that are mashma that even if there weren't Eidim that saw this nos take place, all it is a rumor that this nos took place. Even then, the halach is afal pichakines yoitzi. Rav knows about those brises, but Rav held that those brises are going to be the Rebbe. Who's Rebbe? Rebbe who holds of mechur adover. Rebbe is the one who gives a lot of credence and credibility in halacha to something that just doesn't look right, even though it's really not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But at the same time, in our Mishnah, it's also mechur adavar. And then the man ends up marrying this woman, so it's mechur adavar. And that's why Rebbe would take a whole teitze. So Rav is the loik to the two brises that Rav Sheshes asked. Why would Rav argue with brises? By the way, we know Rav is a Tanu Polik, so Rav has the credentials to argue with a brisa, but it's always a last resort. It's always a b'diavad. Why in this case would he argue? Because in his mind he wasn't arguing. He held that those brises were going to leave with the Rebbe. He didn't hold like Rebbe, and therefore when he came to be mefarish the Mishnah, he wasn't mefarish the Mishnah the Rebbe. He was mefarish the Mishnah the way he held. So what's the bottom line? The hilchzik avasi the Rav. The halach is like Rav, who holds that rumors we don't give so much credibility to, and even our Mishnah Nittan Aleisha says Afal Bishkin is Yoitzi Sunnah with the Eidim that actually saw this nos. Hilchzik avasi the Rebbe. We pass like Rebbe. Then no, we give a lot of credibility to rumors. So the Gemara says, how could that be? Kasha hilchas hilchas. Right, it's a steer between the two halachas. The Gemara says like Kasha, haba called the pasuk, haba called the loy pasuk. There's different types of rumors. A rumor that's pasuk, a rumor that comes to an end. Rashi says that there was, after the rumor spread that the Aveira happened, there was another rumor that spread that the first rumor wasn't a real rumor. But the bottom line is a rumor that expires. So that type of rumor you don't have to worry about. A kol the loy pasuk, that is a rumor. So hilchas like avasik the rab if it's a kol of the pasuk. Hilchas like avasik the rebbe if it's a kol of the loy pasuk. So the Gemara says the loy pasuk the leka edim kerebi. Right? If it's loy pasuk and there are no edim, then the halach is going to be like rebbe. Kol of the pasuk. The ik edim kerab. If it's a kol of the pasuk, then if there's edim, that's the only time the halach is going to be that afu b'shekin is yoytzi like rab. So if you have a kol of the pasuk, adkam. What makes something a call the pasuk? What makes something a call the loy pasuk? Abai said, "Amali ein." I heard from my mother. Dumi the masa said that the chashudei ha'ir, the people that are chashud in the city, how long does a rumor last? Yomo palga, a day and a half. So if the rumor lasts a day and a half, that's a real rumor. At that point already, the ready. That's when we give credibility to this type of rumor. The only time this is true, you have to read the fine print. Only if it didn't stop in between. But if there was an interim period in between where it stopped, meaning it was a day and a half, but it was an hour or two where things quieted down a little bit. A pasuk, no, then that's already a call of the pasuk. When we say that it stopped, it's only considered stopping, meaning that it shouldn't be considered a rumor, is if it wasn't machmas yira. Avapachah machmas yira, but if there were people that caused it to stop, meaning they came and they started threatening people, you continue to talk, it's not going to end well, oh, machmas yira. Then, as far as halach is concerned, we don't look at it necessarily as a kol of the pasuk. Additionally, the only time a koil has any credibility is if we know for sure that there's no one out to get this person. But to the extent that there's someone out to get this person, then we always assume that maybe the oivim are the ones that spread this rumor, and as a result, this rumor would not have any credibility at all. Zok the Gemara Tanan Has. We learned in the Mishnah. This Mishnah is the Mesechtes Gittin. If somebody divorces his wife, and the reason he divorced his wife is because of a shemra, meaning people were spreading rumors about this woman that she did an aveira, and the husband was very worried, and he gave her a get. Whether he had to or didn't have to was irrelevant. He went ahead and he gave her a get, simply based on the rumor. So the halach is lo yachs. He's not allowed to remarry her. Mishum neder. If somebody gave his wife a get because of a neder, so she made a neder that he didn't like, and as a result, he decided he wants to divorce her. Lo yachs. He shouldn't remarry her. Sholach le Rabba bar Huna, Rabba bar Rav Nachman. So Rabba Huna asked Rabba Rav Nachman, Lamdeinu Rabbeinu. This was his question. Kines malcha yoytzi. If someone's moitzis ishta mishum shemra, don't remarry her, and if you do, right, you're not supposed to remarry her. Mishum neder, again, don't remarry her. So what happens in both of these cases if they remarried her? What's the halach? Amalei say, told Tanina, said, I don't know, but I think I have a tzushta. Our Mishnah, somebody was married, and there were rumors, and he divorced his wife. So the halach is that even if he marries her, the halach is yoitzi, he has to give her a get. Now, who's the one that married her in the Mishnah? Someone else, the boy. Meaning, even if the boy would go ahead and marry her, he would have to give her a get. So what was he telling to? That you see from here that if Chazal say, don't get married, the halach is yoitzi. So maybe here too, Chazal said if someone divorces his wife because of a shemra, someone divorces his wife because of a neder, don't remarry her. What happens if you get married? He said, I don't know. But in our Mishnah, don't get married. If you get married, you have to divorce her. So to here, Mistama, that would be the same halacha. So Amalei, so the Gemara says, this was Rabbi bar Rav Nachman's tshuva to Rabbi bar Huna. So Rabbi bar Huna told him back, it's not a tzushtal, hasam hoitziyua, v'hacha hoitziyah. He said the Mishnah is talking about when this man divorced his wife, he was forced to divorce her by Bezdin. Why was he forced to divorce her? Because there were Eidei Tumah. And because there were Eidei Tumah, so there were Eidim that actually saw what happened. So he was literally forced by Bezdin to give her a get. And being that he was forced by Bezdin to give her a get, so therefore, over there, the halacha is that if the boy marries her, he can't stay married to her. And the reason is because if Eidim know that this took place, so then we have a halacha of Kashem Shasur Labal, Kach Asur Labal, he's not let us stay married to her. But over here, it wasn't Hoitziyua. No one forced anyone to give a get. Over here, it was Hoitziyah. He gave her a get. It wasn't forced by Bezdin. And it was something that he decided that he wanted to do. Oh, something that he decided that he wanted to do. Maybe over here, the halacha is going to be that if he remarries, so he's not supposed to. That's what the halach is, but at the same time, if he does, he could stay married. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Bar Nosson. Rabbi Bar Nosson didn't know this distinction. So the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Bar Nosson, Masisa Nami Hoitziyotman. He had the gears in the Mishnah, not Hoitziyua. He had the gears in the Mishnah, Hoitziyah. In his opinion, the Mishnah wasn't talking about where there were Eidei Toma. It was talking about where he divorced his wife simply because of a rumor. And still the Mishnah says that Afa Pisha Kines Yoitzi. He thought it was a Tzushtal, Afa Pisha Kines Yoitzi. So it's interesting. We have here a Shaila, whether the Gerson in the Mishnah is Hoitziyua, he was forced to give a get, or is Hoitziyah that he punk gave a get. What's the Shaila? The Shaila is the whole first part of the daf. Is the Mishnah talking about where there were Eidei Toma, there were actually Eidim that saw this nos, or is the Mishnah not talking about where there were Eidei Toma? If the Mishnah is talking about where there were Eidei Toma, there were Eidim like Rav learned the Mishnah, so it's Hoitziyua, Bezdin forced her to give her a get. So that's very different. We're talking about where Bezdin forced her to give a get. It's a whole different parsha. The reason the boil, after he marries her, can't stay with her is Kashem Shasur L'Mal, Kachasur L'Mal. But if the Gersa of the Mishnah is Hoitziyah, like Rav so it's talking fakir, it's talking about where he decided to give her a get, it's talking about where it was Hoitziyah, so then it would be a good susha. But the Gemara says, I still don't understand the susha. Again, what was the shayla? Rabbi Bar Huna asks Rabbi Bar Nachman a shayla. The Mishnah says if someone's moitzi is ishta mishum shemra, or his moitzi is ishta mishum neder, don't remarry her. Don't be machzir yushasa. Let's say you do. What's the halacha? So you told him have a tzush. The Mishnah says in our Mishnah, Yevamos chaftale, that if somebody gives his wife, if someone was nitan aleshis ish, and then the husband divorced his wife, and then the bayil married her, he said, oh, here's my tzushta. You want to know what halach is if a person violates the isser of getting married? The Mishnah says, so probably there too, it's So the first kind of the Gemara was, no, in our Mishnah, there's a real isser. It's not just a rumor. Yena Mishnah is not talking about what there's a real isser. No, so Rabbi Nachman held it was. In our Mishnah, also not a real isser. Our Mishnah is not talking about Eidei Toma. Our Mishnah is talking about where all it is a rumor. But the Gemara says, I have another problem. Akati, midami, hach over here bad. In our Mishnah, who has to give a get even if he marries her? It's the bayil. The Mishnah over there is talking about the Baal wants to remarry her. Isn't it different? He told him, no, I still think it's a tzushtal. Over here, the Rabbanan said, don't get married. What difference does it make if it's the Baal or the Baal? I don't think it should be different. The Gemara says, no, it is a difference. Because Hassam over there, Alume Al-Malakala. The reason in our Mishnah is the Hassam. The reason in our Mishnah, the Allah is we tell him that even if you get married, you have to give her a get, is because by you marrying her, you're giving credibility to the rumor. And it's for that reason you have to give her a get. Over here, this man divorced his wife because of a rumor. Now he wants to take her back. That's not giving credibility to the rumor. To the contrary, what's that doing? It's knocking out the rumor. He's basically saying, yeah, there was a rumor that was spread. As a result, I was worried. So he went ahead and divorced his wife. But now he looked into it a little bit and he realized that the rumor must have been Layoyat Varmi Oil. So now he wants to take her back. So in our Mishnah, because you're giving credibility to the rumor. Over there, it would make sense that you should be able to stay married. Because by staying married and taking her back, that actually debunks the rumor. It makes her look good. It's good for everyone's reputation. Bottom line is, that's this shak of a tire in the Gemara. Moving on, it's up to Mishnah. So the topic of the previous Mishnah, a digression from Yevamos, starting Arba'achim tomorrow, so this digression is not going to last long, but for right now, we have a little bit of a digression where we're talking not about sugis of Yevamos and Zika and Maimer and Reb Shimon's Eishesach Shloi Hoyo by Lamai, but what we're talking about is a situation where a person finds himself in a matziv where he has to behave a certain way because otherwise people might start spreading rumors about him that are not going to be good for his reputation. So can't you argue, is a person achroi for his reputation? Who cares? They want to talk, let them talk. Eibishter knows the truth. It's not so pashit. There's an Indian of Hasan Mimcha Ikshus Peh, Ulezus Sifasayim, Harchik Mimech. Either way, more on this note. Zok the Mishnah. Hamevi get Mimedina Sayah. Somebody brought a get Mimedina Sayah. Ba'amar already said Befanei Nechtav, Ubefanei Nechtav. Says the Mishnah, Lo Yisas Ishtoi, this man is not let him marry the wife of the man who is divorcing his wife. So what's this Mishnah talking about? The context of this Mishnah is the very first Mishnah, Masechtas Git. The Mishnah says, maybe get me Medina Sayam, Tzarech Sheyoyma, Befanei Nechtav, Ubefanei Nechtav. The case is where there's a man that wants to divorce his wife. The man lives in Medina Sayyam, somewhere in Chutz La'aretz, and his wife is living in Eretz Yisrael right now. He sent a shliach lohilach. He sent a shliach. I want you to be my shliach. I want you to have power of attorney to go divorce my wife on my behalf. This shliach arrives in Beis Din, and he hands over the get. The halacha is the only time the get is going to be considered a good get is if the shliach can testify and say the following: B'fanai nechtav, the get was written in my presence, u'b'fanai nechtav, and it was signed in my presence. Now, this is only true if someone's maybe get memdina sayam. If someone's maybe get in Eretz Yisrael, he doesn't have to say b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtav. But if someone's a maybe get memdina sayam to Eretz Yisrael, he's a shliach lo ilacha, there's a din, he has to say b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtav. Now, there's a tremendous machlokes on Mayram. It's the first sugi Masechtas Git in Rabba and Rava. Why a shliach lo ilacha has to say b'fanai nechtav b'fanai nechtav? Rabba said the reason is l'fisha ein b'kiyin l'shma, because the soifim in Chutz La'aretz weren't b'kiyin l'shma, and the din is that a get isha has to be written l'shma. So simply to make sure that the get isha was written l'shma, the shliach says b'fanai nechtav b'fanai nechtav ayin gitin. Daf Beis Amud Beis, again Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Rava said l'fisha ein edem etzuyim l'kan. The reason is because there are so many people that travel from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, and we're concerned that maybe the Baal at some point is going to be ma'ara on the get. He's going to say this get never happened. So what's the halacha if someone's ma'ara on a shtar? Kiyim shtaris. You have to verify that the edem that signed on the shtar are real edem. Now you're going to start scrambling for kiyim shtaris. You're going to have a problem. So simply because of the fact that we're dealing with marriage and ish and the stakes are really, really high. So Chazal said we need to make sure that as soon as the get is given, we alleviate any chashash that the husband at some future date is going to come and be ma'ara on the shtar. So the aid says, the shliach does, b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtav, that constitutes kiyim shtaris. Like this, if the Baal is going to come be ma'ara later, you're not going to have to worry about it. This is the very, 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 very brief version of the first few daf in the Masechtas Git. So the Mishnah says that what happens if there was a shliach loylach and he brought a get from Medina Sayyam to Eretz Yisrael and he did what he was supposed to do. He said the immortal words, "B'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtav," and Beis Din said, "When mekah." So he takes the get, he gives it over to this woman. She's megureshes, and then the shliach says, turns around to the woman, and he says, says the Mishnah, that's not okay. Lo yisos ishtay. He shouldn't marry her. It's not fine. And the reason is, says Rashi, because what does it look like? It looks like maybe this person's not really telling the truth. Maybe this man really never divorced his wife. What do you mean? He said, b'fanai nechtav. I understand, he said it. But maybe he's lying. And the raglayim b'davar is, he just proposed to her. He decided that he wants to marry her. So this is not something that's okay. A similar halacha. What happens if a man comes from Medina Sayyam and there was a woman whose husband had been away for a long time, and she's in this quasi state of aguna. She doesn't know where her husband is. She's waiting for him to show up, and in the meantime, she's an HSH. She's not allowed to get married. So this man comes into Beis Din, he says, "Mace, I saw your husband. He died. Haraktiv." He says, "I actually killed him." Meaning, not only did he die, I'm the one who killed him. Hiragnuhu, I killed him, but together with somebody else. So here too says the Mishnah Lo Yisas Ishtai, that he himself should not marry this woman. Rabbi Huda says, Haraktiv, if he says, "I killed him," Leitinase Ishtai. Not only can he not marry his wife, no one's allowed to marry her. If a person says, "I'm the one that killed her," so there's an inherent flaw in the edus, as we'll see in the Gemara, so no one's allowed to marry her. If he says, "I killed her together with somebody else," then the halach is she will be able to get married. Now, the backdrop of the second part of the Mishnah is sugis in the end of Masechtas Yevamos, sugis in Periko Isha Rabba, Perika Mevi, that's at the very, very end of the Masechta. And over there, what emerges is that if a woman's husband has been missing for some time, and then an eid echad, one eid comes and says that I saw this man, he's not alive anymore. The halach is that even though ordinarily the rule is ein dava shebe'erva plachas mishnayim, but over here an eid echad would be believed to say that this man is actually not alive. And the reason is mishum aguna akilu bei rabbanon. The rabbanon will make it when it comes to an aguna, and they allowed it to get married. So that's the backdrop to the second part of the Mishnah. An eid echad walks into Beis Din and says, this man, Ruvain, who's been missing, Mace, is dead. Haraktiv, I physically killed him with my own hands. Hiragnuhu, I killed him, but I couldn't do it by myself. Somebody help me. In these three cases, the halach is this woman's going to be able to get married, say the Chacham. But at the same time, Lo Yislish, you don't marry her. Why? So Rashi again, Rabbi Yehuda says that in the case where he says, I killed him myself, she can't get married at all because we don't believe him. because he's a Reitzeach. So you mean Makabal the Eidos of a Reitzeach? If he says I killed her with somebody else, then a Reitzeach can get married. The Gemara is going to ask what's the difference between if I killed him myself, I killed him with somebody else. Either way, we shouldn't accept his Eidos. So the Gemara. So the first part of the Mishnah discussed a case of Hamevi getting Medina Sayam, the first Sugi Masechtas Gittin, and then the second part of the Mishnah discussed the laws of Mishum Aguna Keilu Be'Rabbanan, the fact that an Eid Echad is believed when it comes to Eid Desisha. So first, the first part of the Mishnah. Hamevi getting Medina Sayam, Amar B'fanei Nechtav B'fanei Nechtan, Lo Yisas Ishta. So the Gemara, time of the Medina Sayam. It sounds like the only time this halach is true is the person came from Medina Sayam. Why Dalek Kasamchina? Because we're relying on him. The fact that he came from Medina Sayam, he's not just a shliach, he's not just a messenger, but he's actually saying something. He's a shtickle and aid. He's saying b'fanei nechtam. It's over there that the halachas don't get married. But let's say he was coming from Eretz Yisrael, the Lavada Kasamchinan, where he would not have to say b'fanei nechtam. All he's doing is delivering the get. Yisas Ishta, it sounds like he would be able to marry this woman. Why? Because we're not relying on him. Right? The whole problem of Hasan and Ikshus Peh is if he's an aid, but over here he's not an aid. Frank the Gemara is that true of a maze. In the case where a man walks into Bezdin and he says, I saw your husband die. The Mishnah said, what? Don't get married. But over there, the Lavalek or Samchino, we're not relying on him. What are you going to say? What do you mean? Of course we're relying on him. He's an aid echad. We're relying on him. The Gemara says, no, because the Amar because Chazal said that one of the reasons we will make him when it comes to Aguna is because we assume that a woman, if she really is concerned that her husband might be alive, she'll never marry somebody else because she's afraid to get married to someone else, have children, and then the children end up being mamzeir. So really, we assume that she's doing her own work. So even though he's the one that is the aid, but at the end of the day, we're not just relying on his aidas, we're relying on her as well. And still, and it says that he's not allowed to marry his wife. So what's the kasha? From the Reish of the Mishnah, it's mashma, only if we're relying on him exclusively. That's when the Allah is like Yisrael. But if someone's maybe get me Eretz Yisrael, but what's the deal? Maybe get Medina Sayam. But it turns like you maybe get me Eretz Yisrael. This wouldn't be the Allah. Yeah, when it comes to the Eid Echad, the Eidus Isha, we're not relying on him exclusively because we're also relying on the fact that she herself is going to do her own due diligence. Still, the Allah is like Yisrael. Mara says, no, it's not. It's Ushtal, Hasalek Ksava. At the end of the day, it's still not the same. Why? If someone brings a get from Eretz Yisrael, so over there you're not relying on him at all. Over there it's the get. The get is doing all the talking. So because it's all on the get, so therefore there's no problem with this man going and marrying this woman. If he says before Nechtav, it's a problem. Otherwise not. When it comes to Eidas Isha, it's true we're relying on her as well. But as much as we're relying on her, at the same time, we're also shtickle relying on him. He's the one that's saying, hey, this is no ksav. He doesn't physically have a piece of paper over here. The Tanan, and there's a precedent for this chilik of Gemara at the very, very, very end of the Masechta. Get lemisa, shaksav mechiach, ayin Rashi, what the context is. But again, you see this chilik that there's enough community between Eidos Isha and a get. Get, at the end of the day, you have the ksav that's mechiach. When it comes to Eidos Isha, you don't have a ksav mechiach. That's the chilik. So the Gemara, meis harak if you ragnu yisas Isha. Second part of the Mishnah was talking about where it was Eidos Isha. So again, man walks into Bezdin and he says, Mace, this man's been missing, and he says, I saw him. He's not alive. Haraktiv, I killed him. Hiraknuhu, I killed him together with somebody else. So the Mishnah, lo yises ishta, don't marry. Now, it's mashma, he can't marry her. But she herself, if she wants to get married, she could get married. Rabbi Yehuda argued, he said, haraktiv, if he says, I killed her, then she's not allowed to get married at all. Says the Gemara. The Shita Sachacha is that if a man says, I killed your husband, she can get married. It's great. We have the Eid Echad that we were looking for. Now, he can't marry her because that doesn't look good. But if she wants to get married, that's fine. He can't marry her. She could get married to somebody else. How could that be? In fact, Rav Yosef said, if somebody walks into the and he says somebody was Reveyam, Nishkav Zachar, and he did a loinsi, he forced me. So the Allah is Huva Achim, it's from the Harga. He counts as one of the eight. It's a big chiddush. But the Allah is, even though he's a shtickle baldavar here, right? He is the one that was the victim. But if he says Pliny Ravani loinsi, the Allah is he can be misar for somebody else to kill this person, to testify in court. The Allah is Mishkav Zachar, will be Chayv Misa. This is what they can do. Let's say he says, I did this Aveira, but Pliny was Ravani, but I was complicit. I was okay with it. So then the Allah is Rashu. So this person now was a Rashu because he himself was involved in that Aveira Mishkav Zachar. It says in the Torah, that a Rashu is Pasal Eidos. So if a Rashu is Pasal Eidos, he can't say Eidos. So what do you see from here? That if a person says that I myself was involved in this Aveira, so he's now Pasal Eidos. And what's the reason that he's Pasal Eidos? Because he just implicated himself. He made himself into a Rasha. A Rasha can't say Eidos. So how in our Mishnah, the Gemara, could the Chachamim say that? If a man looks at the Beis and says, I killed your husband. Oh, perfect. We were waiting for this piece of news. Glad you killed him. Now the Eidos, she can get married. How can she get married? He's a Rasha. Why is it different than Rav Yosef's halacha of Ploini, Rivani, Lurtzaini? With Allah is, he's not believed. Now, who's the Kasha? The Kasha is on the Mishnah or the Kasha is on Rav Yosef? It's on Rav Yosef, right? Rav Yosef's the Amayra. The Mishnah is the Mishnah. But it's a Kasha Rav Yosef. How could Rav Yosef then say that Ploini, Rivani, Lurtzaini, the Allah is, he's a Rasha and he's not believed to say Eidos? The Churif in the Mishnah, you see, he is believed to say Eidos. Now, the truth is, in the Mishnah, you see that the Chachamim hold that he's believed to say Eidos. Rabbi Yehuda holds not. So in theory, Rabbi Yosef could always say, I'm going according to the Chacham. I'm going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Right? Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha is that he's not believed. So really, Rabbi Yosef's shita, we're asking a kasha coming with a blitz. How does Rabbi Yosef stem with the Chachamim? I hear. But stems very nicely with Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara is going to attempt to say that in the course of its discussion in Shittas Rabbi Yosef. But that's the Gemara's kash. So the Gemara says maybe there's a pashta chilik. Maybe v'chitei meshani edus isha dakilu b'rabbanon. We know edus isha is more kuludik. And that's believed by edus isha mishum maguna akilu b'rabbanon. So maybe when it comes to edus isha, it's more kuludik. Meaning ordinarily a rosh is not believed to say edus. But edus isha, you have so many kulos. So even if the guy himself, the Reitzeach, walks into Beis Din, his blood on his hands, he says, I killed him. But it's Eidos Isha, it's a kula. So don't start to Mishkav Zacher to Eidos Isha. Eidos Isha is Mishum Aguna, Kilu Bei Rabbanim. The Gemara says, no, it can't be. Because Ramanasha said not like that. He said, Gazel to different cultural Eidos Isha. Someone that's a Rasha, because of doing Isuri de Rabbanan, he's allowed to say Eidos Isha, even though he's possible for Eidos. But for Eidos Isha, he's believed. Gazel the different Torah, but if someone's a Rasha because he did Averis Midairaisa, like he's a Gazlan on a biblical level, Pasal Eidos Isha. So Allah says Pasal Eidos Isha. What do you see? There's no chilik between Eidos Isha and Ad Eidos Isha. So again, how could Rav Yosef go connected to the Chachamim? The Gemara doesn't want to entertain now that maybe he met Rav Yehuda. We're assuming that he wants to share with the Chachamim. The Chachamim hold that the Reitzeach is believed to say Eidos. So why is it that Pliny Revani Lurtzaini, even though he's saying that he's a Balaveira? And don't tell me that maybe Eidos Isha is different, because you see Rabbi Nasha said not that way. So the Gemara says, no, maybe Rabbi Nasha don't Rav Yehuda. Maybe Rav Yosef will tell you, I know what Rabbi Nasha said. And I happen to agree with Rabbi Nasha. But Rabbi Nasha was only saying it aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, he's saying that Eidos Isha, the halacha is going to be, that a Gazlan Dairaisa is going to be possible. And that would be very nice. Why Rabbi Yehuda said in our Mishnah that she's not going to not believe. But according to the Chachamim, maybe there is a nafkamina between Eidos Isha and not Eidos Isha, and that's why, even though Pliny Revaini Lurtzaini, he's not believed to say Eidos, but in our Mishnah he is believed because it's Eidos Isha. So the Gemara says, okay, that would answer Rav Yosef. But is Rav Menashe himself mechuyev to learn that way? It's a little bit of a tricky Gemara. Is Rav Menashe himself mechuyev to learn that way? The Gemara says, no, I'm going to Rav Menashe. Rav Menashe will tell you, I hear from Yosef, you want to say it, but say the Gemara. But I'm telling you now, I didn't mean Rav Yehuda. I meant it alibi the Chachamim. I know the Amri Afilu the Rabbanon. I meant it even according to Rabbanon. Meaning even the Rabbanon hold that by Eidos Isha, the halacha is that a Rasha Dairaisa is going to be Pasal Eidos. If that's the case, so why is it if the person walks into Beis Din and says that I killed somebody, we listen to his Eidos, but time the Rabbanon Hachem Shan Rabbanon over here is Kedir Rava. Amar Rava said Adam Karvetz Alatzmoy, the Eino the Mesim Atzmoy Rasha, very well known halacha, and that is a person is not believed to make himself into a Rasha, and because a person is not believed to make himself into a Rasha, so it's for that reason if he says I killed someone, the halacha is that he is not going to be believed to say that he actually killed him. We believe him that the person died, but we don't believe him that he killed him. And as a result, he doesn't have a din of a Rasha. And because he doesn't have a din of a Rasha, so it's for that reason the halacha is if she wants to get married to somebody else, she would be able to get married to somebody else. Now, this teretz is going to work according to Ramanasha. Ramanasha said that even though I said that when it comes to Eidos Isha, Rosh is possible Eidos, and from the Chacham and the Mishnah, you see not that way. No, it's not a kasha, because in the Chacham and the Mishnah, we're not talking about an established Rosh. We're talking about a person that implicated himself as a Rosh. He said, how do you know he's a Rosh? Because he said he killed somebody. Eido the Mason, that's my Rosh. But this is not going to help us for Rav Yosef, because Rav Yosef clearly said, Ploini Rav Oni Lurtzoini, that the halach is, we look at him as a Rasha, and therefore he's not believed to say Eidos on the Reveya. So obviously Rabbi Yosef doesn't hold of the kind of Eino the Mesa Matzmei Rasha. So the Gemara now is going back to its original question. We'll recap this in a second. So afraid the Gemara has Rabbi Yosef still with the Mishnah. At the end of the day, you see from the Mishnah that if a person says Haraktiv, I killed, he's believed Rabbi Yosef said that a person does not believe, and the Mason the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef held like Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, and not Rabbanon. I hold even like Rabbanon. Shani Edus Isha, Dakilu Bei Rabbanon. I hold Edus Isha is different. Dakilu Bei Rabbanon. I Rabbi Menashe. Rabbi Menashe said not that way. Rabbi Menashe said that even by Edus Isha, Rosh was possible. Edus, Rabbi Menashe, Rabbi Yehuda. When he said that, he was going to leave it to Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, in the Mishnah was Mavur, it's not an easy Gemara, but it was Mavur in the Mishnah that if a person would walk into Bezdin and he would say, there's a woman, she's married, her husband went away for a long time, we have no idea where he is. He said, I know where he is, he's dead. And now I know he's dead. I physically killed him with my own bare hands. I killed this man. So the halach is he can't marry her, but if she wants to get married to somebody else, she would be allowed to get married to somebody else. This is something that would be okay. And really, this halach is a very, very big chiddush. The reason it's very big chiddush is because if he said himself that he killed her, so he's a Rasha. So if he's a Rasha, we know a Rasha's Pasal Eidos. So if a Rasha's Pasal Eidos, so why should it be okay for him to be able to, for us to, why should we accept his Eidos and why should she be able to get married? And really what emerged from the Gemara is one of two things. Either we can say that being that it's Eidos Isha, by Eidos Isha, Akilu Bei Rabbanan, or we can say that Adam Karav Eitzel Atzmai ve'ein Adam Mesam Atzmai Rasha. How do you know that this person did the Aveira? Only because he himself's the one that said he did the Aveira. Okay, if he's the one that said he did the Aveira, we don't accept his Eidos. Ein Adam Mesam Atzmai Rasha. The person doesn't have the ability to implicate himself, and as a result, it's for that reason we wouldn't accept it. But the bottom line is, Zok the Gemara, that either you'll have to be miyashiv that it's Eidos Isha Mishum Eidos Isha Akilu Bei Rabbanan, or you can have to say it's because of Ein Adam Mesam Atzmai Rasha. Now the Gemara Cheshbon didn't what Rabbi Yosef said and what Rabbi Menashe said, so that's just in the cheshbon of the Gemara. But what comes out of Maskana is, at first glance, it's very hard to learn the Mishnah, but the Maskana, there's two very pashta terutzim how to understand the Mishnah. So the last part of the Mishnah was, Heraktiv hiragnu tinasa. So Rabbi Yehuda said, he argued with this huge chiddush. Rabbi Yehuda said, I disagree. If a man comes and he says, I killed this woman, the halacha is, his wife is not allowed to get married. However, hiragnu, if I killed her with somebody else, then she would be able to get married. So the Gemara says, Maishna haraktiv umaishna hiragnu. What's the difference if he says I killed him myself, or if I killed him with somebody else? Either way, l'chayra, he's implicating himself. So why do we trust his eidos? Rabbi Yehuda said, but no, the case of hiragnu is not he said I killed with somebody else, but it's where he's talking about where he said Ani hayisi im hargav. I didn't kill him, but I was with the person that killed him. The Gemara, Vatanya, we learned in the Brayso, Rabbi Yehuda, they told Rabbi Yehuda, Maisa, there was a story. There was a story with a listim. He was a robber, and he was on death row in Kaputki. They told him, and as he's on death row, so they asked him, is there anything you want to say, like final words? He said, yeah. He says, go tell Esha Shimon ben Koyin, the wife of Shimon ben Koyin, Ani Arakti as Baila. I killed her husband. I know she's an aguna, and before I die, I want to make a confession, and I want her to know that I killed her husband. And I did it b'chnisasei l'lud. I did it as I was entering Lud. Some say b'chnisasei l'lud. But when he was entering Lud. But the bottom line is, they see her ishtai, and they went ahead and they allowed her to get married. So the Chachamim told Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda, how could you tell me haraktiv loitinase? There's a real story where this happened. He told me Misham Raya, you're telling me a Raya from there, but harga. No, that's not what happened. What happened was the person said, I was together with the Hargan, and in that case, it's going to be okay. Wasn't the story, he was a listin. This man was on death row. You see, he was a Rasha. Right? It's clear this person was a Rasha. It's talking about where he was killed together with listios, meaning he was big. The Memshala, they caught people, and he was there. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he got fachat. He's on death row. Yeah, they didn't like Daiku the Katli. It was a non-Jewish court, and they were killing him. But not because he really deserved to die. What do you see from here? You see Bahatanya, you see Benichusa, right? You see this is a raya to the way the Gemara is explaining Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said that if a person says, I killed, then no, then this woman wouldn't be able to get married. If I was there together with the people that killed, so that's already a good egos, and you see that must be what Rabbi Yehuda held, because in this brisa, where the Gemara tells this, Maisa Shahaya, Kachaya, it's actually interesting because we always speak out that Rabbi Yehuda is always bringing Maisas to support his opinion. Over here, Rabbi Yehuda said a Shita, Omulay the Rabbi Yehuda, Maisa, right? They came to Rabbi Yehuda with a Maisa. What did Rabbi Yehuda tell him? You don't know the Maisa. It's not what happened. Let me tell you the story. Misham Raya, that wasn't the Maisa. But either way, this is a little bit the Chachamim are beating Rabbi Yehuda at Rabbi Yehuda's game, and we'll exhale. So just two ha'aras as it relates to today's daf. So the first is more on the first part of the daf, the case of a nitan, and then the second hour will be something a little bit light that touches on today's daf and the chulu. That is, so the topic of the majority of the daf was the Mishnah daf Chaf Daled Amud Beis. The Mishnah discusses a man that's chashed. He's chashed that he was mezana with a woman. And the Mishnah mentioned the Reisha and the Sefer. The Reisha was where the man was nitan, he's a chashed on a shifcha or on an oivedes koichavim. And then the shifcha was ונשתחררה, or the oivedes koichavim was Zeira. He wants to marry her. So the Mishnah says, יכנוס, he's not allowed to marry her. And if he marries her, if this man was chashed on an HSH and then her husband divorced her, then יכנוס. And if he gets married to her, the halacha is going to be that he's going to have to get married. So yesterday, we talked about the first part of the Mishnah, the Gemara did. And today, the Gemara discussed the second part of the Mishnah. I want to revisit the first part of the Mishnah. So the first part of the Mishnah is Hanittan ala shifcha ונשתחררה. Oy ala oivedes koichavim ונשתחררה. Hareza lo yichnos. The halacha is that he's not allowed to get married. And the Gemara said, why? Why is he not allowed to get married? So the Gemara said, because it says a pasuk in Mishnah, which is the theme of today's daf as well. Right now, people are spreading rumors that this man was mezana with this oivedes koichavim, this non-Jewish woman. If he marries her, he's going to give credibility to the rumor. And being that he's going to give credibility to the rumor, so for that reason, we tell him that this is not something you're allowed to do. This Mishnah, not surprisingly, is brought down in Shulchan Aruch. The Mechaber in Even Ezer Simin Yud Aleph Sivkon Hey Paskins. Hanittan mishifcha v'nachris v'neskaira v'neshtachra. If somebody was accused of doing an avera with a shifcha, with a nachris, and now they were freed, or neskaira, so that he's in a position now that if he wants to marry them, he can marry them. Lo yichnois says the Mechaber, then kines, but b'di'evet, if he marries her yoitzi, lo yoitzi, he does not have to give her a get. And the Makar is the ratio of the Mishnah Chaf Daled Amud Beis, and then suing Gemara. This is the Makar to this halacha in Shulchan Aruch. Rav Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe, and this is in Even Ezer Chelik Aleph Simin Chav Zayin. So he was asked the following question. Now it's interesting. The shoyl was a Rav. The way Rav Moshe describes him is Rav Echad Samuch LePittsburgh. So he lived near Pittsburgh. Now this Shiloh was in 1951. So in 1951, a Rav in a suburb of Pittsburgh, it seems, asked Rav Moshe the following question. He said there's someone in his Kehillah that was married to a non-Jewish woman for 8 years. And now this woman was Megaya. His Shiloh was, is this man allowed to marry his wife now, Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, or is he not allowed to marry her, Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael? And the shoyl was coming from a Mishnah. A Mishnah was Yevamos, Daf Chaf Daled Amud Beis. The Mishnah says, Hanittan ala shifcha ונשתחררה, oy alo oivedes koichavim ונשתחררה, hareze lo yichnos. Now, b'di'evet, they could stay married, but the shayla wasn't b'di'evet, the shayla was l'chatchila. They're married for 8 years. That wasn't Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. Now they want to get married, b'chuppah v'kedushin. And the question that the Rav asked from Moshe was, is this okay? Could they get married? He's a man that was married to a non-Jewish woman, where the halacha is that if she's nisgaira, hareza lo yichnos, and it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. So this is the question that he asks: is he allowed to get married to her, or is he not allowed to get married to her? So Moshe said that. Look in the Gemara. Look at the Gemara. Rashi says, what's this halacha of hanittan ala shifcha ונשתחררה oivedes koichavim ונשתחררה hareza lo yichnos? Rashi says we're talking about someone that's a chashud. Koloimar shetoyan in all of divrei laws. That's why he's a nitan, like a nizik. They're tining on him. They're saying about him that he did an avera. There's a rumor. What's the issue? The issue is that he's going to get married. So now all of a sudden it's going to give credibility to the rumor. So to prevent giving credibility to the rumor, which is an Indian, because so we tell this person that you shall not go and marry this woman. So Moshe, it's clear that Rashi learned to sugya that the whole Indian of is because you're giving credibility to a rumor. Ramesh said, in your case, it's not a rumor. In your case, it's the news. It's a fact. He's been living with her for 8 years. You're not giving credibility to any rumor by letting them get married. He says, it's possible you can get married. It wasn't the Shiloh. He says, the whole Indian over here is because of establishing and giving credibility to the rumor. But over here, it's a kind of rumor. Over here, everybody knows they've been living together. Never. But this is the way they've been living. So because it's not a rumor, it's Pashat halacha. The Mishnah doesn't apply. Over here, it's more cool with it. Ironically, over here it says, "Yichnos." You can get married. But it's not so Pashat. It says because if you look in the Rishonim, if you look in the Nemuka Yosef, the Nemuka Yosef says that this halacha of hanit'an al hashifcha ונשתחררה oil avedas kecham and eskai rezel yichnos is even if Adam would step forward and Adam would say, we know for sure that Aveira happened. So we know for sure that Aveira happened. Still, the halacha would be our rezel yichnos. Rashi doesn't seem to learn that way. Of Azoi state in the Nemuka Yosef, and he brings a raya from a Tosefta. Zokra Moshe. In Rashi's pshat in the sugi, it's posh. The child doesn't even have feast. The Nemuka Yosef says not that way, and because the Nemuka Yosef says not that way, so in the Nemuka Yosef already it's before that's not the halacha. So if now that even when they're Aiden, still this is going to be a problem. So maybe there should be an issue. But Moshe said that it's posh to him that even in the Nemuka Yosef wouldn't be a problem. He says why? Because at the end of the day, the Gemara says that what's the Inyan? Haser mimcha ikshus peh. It's all about not making yourself look bad. What do you mean? If they're Eidei Toma, so how are you making yourself look bad? Everybody knows that anyways. The teretz is just because there are Eidim that walked into Bezdin and testified that this man was Mizana with this woman, it doesn't mean that the whole world knows. It doesn't mean that it's Mefursim. It just means that it's not a rumor. It's a fact. Be'enei Bezdin, it's a fact. Be'enei Hamakim, it's a fact. But be'enei abrios, it's still not a fact. And it's for that reason the Gemara said, don't get married. Because if you're going to go in and get married, now you're going to be mefarsim it. And there's an Indian not to be mefarsim in Aveira. He tells to a Gemara, Yuma Peiva, but the Gemara said, if someone doesn't have Aveira, don't be mefarsim. Ashrei Adam Kisui Chet, right? It's always praiseworthy not to go ahead and to be mefarsim your Aveiras. So, of course, the halacha says that the Nemuka Yosef is going to be true, even if there are Eidim. But at the end of the day, it's only because of the fact that even though there are Eidim, it doesn't necessarily mean everyone knows. And if it doesn't necessarily mean everyone knows, so therefore there's still an Inyan for you to be machasid and for you to not go out and let everybody know. But he says in this case, it's already mefursim. Here, literally everybody knows. They've been living as husband and wife for all these years. So you're not establishing anything. There's nothing happening by you going ahead and getting married. In the world of Hasem Mimcha Ikshus Pelu Zus Vasayim Harchik Mimecho. So said Rav Moshe, I believe that even according to the Nemuka Yosef, it's still not going to be a problem. Then Rav Moshe went further and he said there is another Shita Sarishayim. The Rashba and the Ritva. Since you look at the Rashba and the Ritva, they also like the Nemuka Yosef. They learn that the halacha of the Mishnah is going to be true even if they were Eidei Toma. And they explain that what's the Indian. The issue is because there's a hasim that people are going to spread rumors that maybe the gerus of the woman wasn't a true gerus. That's what the issue is. Now maybe her gerus wasn't a real bona fide gerus, and therefore don't go ahead and do this. Because people are going to spread rumors on the gerus. Rav Moshe said, in this case, he doesn't think it's a problem either. Because the Rashba and the Ritva were talking about when they were Mizana. And now, all of a sudden, they want to get married. So now you're going to tell me, people are going to say she never really wanted to be married. This man was married to her for 8 years. He doesn't seem to have a problem being married to her, even though she's not a Jewish woman. So what are people going to say? They're going to start spreading rumors. Oh, she must have done a gerus, a conversion, so she can marry this man. They have a family. They've been living together for years. So that can't be the time. So Rav Moshe said, I went to all the Rishonim, Rashi, the Nemuka Yosef, the Rashba, and the Ritva, with his incredible koich that Rav Moshe says, push it to me. It's not even a shayla. There is no issue. This couple can get married. The halach of the Mishnah, Reza lo Yichnos, is not going to apply. But then Rav Moshe told the Rav in Pittsburgh, he said, but there's one thing I do have a little bit of an issue with. He says, your shayla, which is, could they get married? Could they not get married? The Mishnah, Yevamos, Amud Beis, I have no problem with that Mishnah. It's l'chatchila. It's keneged a Mishnah in Shas. It's keneged a Sivkot in Shulchan Aruch. But for that, you have to be Rav Moshe. He says Pashut. It's not the same thing. And in this case, you're not a Nittan. You're not a Chashud. You're not just Eidei Tomo. They were married. Once they're married, it's very, very different. Rav Moshe, I'll tell you what I'm not comfortable with. I'm not comfortable with the gerus. He says every gerus, he says, it's very darkest thing, and you have to make sure that the person's being makabel Torah and mitzvahs. And he says, I don't know, I'm not comfortable. He told the Rav Bekitzi he wasn't comfortable with him presiding over this gerus. That was what he told him. And he gave him a few reasons. One of the reasons he told him is not shaykh. He said because a ger has to be makabel all Torah and mitzvahs. So he says this woman is being megaya, right? What's her hasaga of Torah and mitzvahs? Probably her husband. Right? Sounds like she's his mentor. She's his Rebbe. He says, no, what kind of Rebbe is he? A man that lived with a shiksa for 8 years? He's the Rebbe. So probably in her mind, what does it mean to be a Yid? Oh, to look like my husband. Oh, he's a good Jew. He says, this guy is not this. A gerus of Kabbalah's mitzvahs of being like your husband. been pissed off, fertige guy. So that's not going to be a gerus. So Moshe said the gerus is something that I'm not so comfortable with. So he says, you want to know your shiloh, the second shulchan aruch? I have no problem with that. He says, I just don't know. You have to make sure that there's going to be a good gerus. So he told him that in the city of Pittsburgh, there's Gedolim, there's big rabbanim there. So he told him, go to Pittsburgh. He says, you go to Pittsburgh, you'll find the Chashiv Rav, and over there, let someone over there preside over the gerus. And if you find someone there to preside over the gerus, that's where it's going to be okay. Now, the truth is that, Pittsburgh once upon a time was an Ir Ve'ein B'Yisrael. It was mamish. This is 1951. It was mamish an Ir Ve'ein B'Yisrael. Yesterday we were talking about Hagoy Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Zechat Tzadik, V'Kodesh L'Vracha, and we were talking about how he was a Sinai, right? Reb Chaim was a great Sinai. We always talk about Reuven Margolis, who was a great Sinai. Right? When you think of Sinai, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef comes to mind as being a great Sinai. In 1951 in Pittsburgh, unbeknownst to many, one of the great Sinais of all time was living. He was a tremendous guy, and his name was Reb Zev Wolfleider. Reb Zev Wolfleider was an incredible Sinai. He was a tremendous baki, a half-full digger baki. The Welt says that it was Margula Bapume. He used to say that, what does it mean to have a bekias? Right? Ploini has a bekias. What does it mean as a baki? So he says, a bekias doesn't mean that you know where to find things. Right? Someone asks you a shayla, so you know where to look and you know where to find things. He said, that's not what a baki is. He said, a baki is someone that's learning a sugi in Choshe Mishpat. He has a kasha in a sugi in Choshe Mishpat, and he brings a raya from a Rashi in Tzfanya. That's what he said. That's a baki. That was Margula Bapume. That a baki is not someone that knows how to find things. A baki is someone that's kol kula wrapped around his head. That was from Zev Wolfleider. He was one of the rabbanim that were living in Pittsburgh in 1951. This is a classic Shuvas Ramosha, where Ramosha told him the Ikka Shayla itself, I don't have a problem. One thing he told him, by the way, is you have to have havchana. He says you have to wait 3 months. Because the halacha is that if a woman was married and then she becomes an almana, she gets divorced, she falls liyibum, right? It doesn't matter what the situation was. She always has to wait 3 months before she gets married to somebody else to be mafchin between who the right, because we're afraid that she may get pregnant, you're not going to know who the father of the child is. Was it the previous husband, was the later husband? So if you wait 3 months and then she's expecting, so you'll know if it's from the first husband or from the, right, like this, everything is going to be good. So Moshe said that even though over here it's the same man and the same woman, but you have to have avchana, because once she's megayer, so now if you're not going to wait 3 months and a child's going to be born, you're going to have a shiloh. Was the child born Feidegeris or was the child born Nachtegeris? So for that also you have to have avchana. That's all in this tshuva. But the bottom line is that's the tshuva for Moshe. That's the first part. The second are very quickly and very light. And that is, so the Gemara said in today's daf, we began with Rav's comment on the Mishnah. And then Rav Sheshes, when he heard what Rav said, commented on Rav, he said, Amino kinayim v'shachav Rav amalo hashmaitza. He says, I think that Rav must have said this while he was falling asleep. He said, it can't be. And he asked the kasha from one brisa, and he asked the kasha from another brisa, but this was his line. He must have said this while he was falling asleep. If you look at the Maseres Hashas, this is not the only time Rav Shesha said this. He says this to Kaman, later in Yevamos Tzadik Aleph Amud Aleph, the Kaman in Yevamos Kuftes Amud Beis, Bavakama Mem Zayin Amud Beis, Bavakama Samachei Amud Aleph, neither daf samach amalal. So this was something that Rav Sheshes would say about Rav. Amino kinayim v'shachav Rav amal hashmaitza. And the truth is, if you think about it for a second, it's hard to understand how Rav Sheshes would talk this way about Rav. Number one, Rav Sheshes was a Talmud Muvik of Rav. So if he's a Talmud Muvik of Rav, why would he talk this way? And Rav was called Rav. He was Rabban Shel Kol Bnei Agoylo. So Rav Sheshes would say about Rav, he hears the Rebbe say, the Rebbe must have said this while he was full. He must have been dwindling. He must have been in this semi-sleeping state. You would never say this about a Chashav Yid, maybe not about anybody. And here you have Rav Sheshes talking this way about his Rebbe, Rav. So we've mentioned this in the past. The Chafetz Chaim, in the end of the Sefer Chafetz Chaim, so he brings a few addendums to the Sefer. There's a few Mekaymis that Chafetz Chaim thought were very important in the world of Hilchas Chafetz Chaim, that he literally attached it, the transcript of these particular Shtiklach Torah, to the back of Sefer Chafetz Chaim. The first one that he has is a tshuva from the Chavas Yar. It's in Shailas Tshuva's Chavas Yar. It's Simin Kuf Nun Beis. Incidentally, if you want to see all of them, there are two tshuvas that he brings from the Marik, and then he has one shtickle from the Aliyas Rabbeinu Yomi, which is quoted in the Shita Mekubetzes and Bava Basra Daf Lamed Tesam Aleph. So it's a shtickle random. It's a tshuva from the Chavas Yar, two tshuvas from the Marik, and a piece of Shita Mekubetzes quoting the Aliyas Rabbeinu Yomi, Mesechus Bava Basra Lamed Tesam Aleph. But the tshuva's Chavas Yar that Chafetz Chaim quoted is a tshuva where the Chavas Yar, in this early 18th century, was discussing different Gemaras where it seems that Amiram spoke in a way that was not befitting. And from a Hilchis, Pashit, Shmiras Haloshim perspective, Hayatachin, he was able to talk that way. So he goes through a few. The first one that he discusses is this idea, that you find this idea, that Rav Sheshes would often say, Kinai v'shachiv Rav Omar Lahosh Maitza. And he says, how's it possible that Rav Sheshes would have talked this way about his Grosser Rebbe? I mean, this is his Rebbe, and why would he ever talk this way? So he says that it's Pashit, that you have to say that he was saying the Shvach. And the Shvach is that Rav never said anything in his life that wasn't perfect. Never said anything that wasn't perfect. So if Rav said this, it must be said while he was sleeping. He couldn't have said it awake. There's no way Rav would have said something that's upgefrekt in Abrais if he was awake. Elamai, Rav was talking while he was sleeping, and he said something, and somebody must have overheard it. And a different Gazak was the Rebbe Gazak, and now all of a sudden he's that same Torah, and Rav Sheshes said, can't be. He could not have said it in a state where he was awake, because it's just not something he would have done. Either way, that's what the Chavos Yair says. Another Gemara that the Chavos Yair talks about is the Gemara that we learned not so long ago. The Gemara says in Yevamos daf tes Amud Aleph, Chamesh Esrei Noshim Poitches Zeira. So Amalei Levi the Rebbe, Levi told Rebbe, 15, I have a 16. So when Rebbe heard Levi 16, he said, so the Chavos Yair Mamnish, he said, he doesn't understand this Gemara. No one understood this Gemara when we learned it. Right? So you have to be the Chavos Yair to not understand this Gemara. He said, Pashav Shah, why would he talk this way? So he discusses first who Rebbe was, who Levi was. He says he doesn't understand it. So he says you have to say that Rebbe must have felt that there's an Indian of Zroik Marla Talmidim. Sometimes you have to talk a certain way to your Talmud because he understands that this Talmud is going to have tremendous hatzlach if he's talked through that way. He says, Befrat Rebbe, the Gemara says that Shemeis Rebbe Batla Anov. So Rebbe was a very humble person. It's not like Rebbe was someone that had any midas agaiva. So if that's the case, Pashav Shad, how could you understand it? So the Chavos Yair says there must be something along those lines, and it goes through. It's a nice truth, and it goes through a bunch of different examples from Shas where you find different Gemaras that seem to be surprising. He's miyashav all of them, and again, Chafetz Chaim brought it. He printed this at the end of the Sefer Chafetz Chaim because he felt it was very important to see this Chavos Yair, to know how to understand certain Gemaras, to see how they reconcile what the Chafetz Chaim wrote in Hilchos Chafetz Chaim. But I just want to mention one. Not the one that we learned just now, Yevamos Chaf Daled, and not the one that we learned in Yevamos Daf Tes. But there's just one other one, and we're going to end with this. That is, there's a Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin. The Gemara is on Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis. So the Gemara there is discussing something very interesting. Ma'isa Shahaya. The Gemara says, Reb Shimon Chalaf Tav Ka'azal Be'urcha. He was once traveling, Pogu by Hanach Ar Yevasa, and all of a sudden he was encountered by lions. And they were roaring towards him. Clearly, they hadn't been fed in a little while, and they were hungry. And they saw Reb Shimon ben Chalafta, and they started making a gerida. Reb Shimon ben Chalafta said the following pasuk. He said, "Hakfirim shayagim lataref." Right? L'chol b'nei Yisrael le'yachretz galav l'zhaynai. So that's what you do if you see a dog. What do you do if you see a lion? Hakfirim shayagim lataref. That's what Shimon Chalafta said. So the Gemara says, as soon as he said that, so there were two thighs, big, große shtick flesh that came down from Shemayim. So it says, Chada achlua, one of them they ate, v'chada shavkua, and the other one they left. So the lions were hungry, but so much meat came down, they actually had some shirayim. There were some leftovers. So Shimon Chalafta took this one yerech that was left over, and he say, he brought it to the base medrash. Boy, Allah, and he had a shayla. Is it kosher meat or is it not kosher meat? So what's the shayla? Dover Tameh, who's there? Oy Dover Tahar. They told him, ain't Dover Tameh Yomi Nashamayim. We have a Messiah that a Dover Tameh doesn't fall from Shemayim. So he said, if it fell from heaven, it must be it's kosher. And they told him, if you want to eat this piece of meat, you're going to be allowed to eat this piece of meat. Talk to Gemara. Boy, Reb Zeira. So Reb Zeira asked Reb Avahu the following question. He heard this story, Reb Zeira did, and he asked Reb Avahu, what would be if a donkey fell down from Shemayim? It looks like it's a chamor. I mean, it's a piece of meat, but it says oisis gedoylus. It's a chamor. It's a donkey. A donkey is a non-kosher animal. There's a cloud in Dover Tameh Yomi min Hashamayim. So, but what happens if a donkey falls down? Now, if it's a donkey, it looks like it's not kosher. If it's not kosher, maybe it shouldn't be okay to eat. So the Gemara says, Amalei, Reb Zeira. So the Gemara says, this was Reb Zeira's question to Reb Avahu. So Reb Avahu told Reb Zeira, Yorud Nala. He said, Yorud Nala. What does that mean? Rashi. Tanin Shoita. Oif Sheshmoy Tanin. There's an Oif who's called a Tanin, but who's Shoita. He's a fool. Ubaycha umas betamin, and it's always walking around crying and wailing, and it's always in a state of hesped. So Rabbi Bo told Rabbi Zeira, "You yorud nalech ha'amrilei. Didn't you hear ein davar tamid yoyim nashamayim?" So either your story's not going to happen, or if it happens, it's going to be kosher. But the bottom line is ein davar tamid yoyim nashamayim. So the Chavos Yair, when here in Amud Beis, the tshuva that Chofetz Chaim quotes at the end of the Sefer. So he's going through all these different Gemaras where you find Amiram spoke to Amiram in a disrespectful way. So he said, Yarud Nala? He said, why would Rabbi Vo spoke in this way? Because he didn't like Reb Zeira's kasha. The Seder, he didn't like the question. What happens if a Chamar falls down from the heavens? But why would he talk to him in such a way? Why would he say Yarud Nala? This was the question that he asked. So the Chavos Yair says the Dover Nifla. The Chavos Yair says that I think in order to understand this, we have to take a step back and we have to understand a little bit better who Rabbi Vo was and who Reb Zeira was. He said Rabbi Vo and Reb Zeira, they were both two of the great Amoyra. However, they were very, very different. And clearly, their personalities were different. And if you go through the Gemaras, they were very, very different people. The Gemara says about Rabbi Vo, on Bava Mitzvah, Dapei Daled Amud Aleph, Shufrei de Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana was so handsome that his handsomeness, his beauty was me'ein Shufrei de Rabbi Vo. It was me'ein the handsomeness of Rabbi Vo. Shufrei de Rabbi Vo was me'ein Shufrei de Yaakov Avinu. And Shufrei de Yaakov Avinu me'ein Shufrei de Adam Arisha. So the Gemara here is mentioning, right, the Arba Yefei Yoshev Oilam. So these are the men that were the most handsome men. Rav Kahana, Rabbi Vo, Yaakov Avinu, and Adam Arisha. What happened to Rabbi Yochanan? That's the Gemara's kash over here. But Rabbi Yochanan was also, we know, Shufid Rabbi Yochanan. But that's what the Gemara says. So Rabbi Vo, you see, was a very, very handsome person. The emes is that the Gemara says in the Sechtes Ksubis, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, that Rabbi Vo, when he would leave yeshiva, Rabbi Vo, ki have asim in the sifta the Bekesar, when he would leave yeshiva and would go to the Bekesar, Nafkin Amos the Bekesar Lape. So all the women of the Bekesar, they would come out Unashranle. And they would sing for him, they would serenade him. They would say, Rabba Da'ameh, they would say, great rabbi, Madbarna, Do'umse, he's the leader of his nation. Butzina Dinahira, someone that's so handsome, Baruch Masich L'Shalom, may all your comings and goings be in peace. So you see, Rabbi Vo was a very, very handsome person. Truth is, Rabbi Vo wasn't just very handsome, he was also very, very strong. There's a few Gemaras that talk about the physical strength of Rabbi Vo. One of those Gemaras is the Gemara Brachas Daf Samach Amud Aleph. The Gemara there says that once upon a time, the bathhouses were considered very dangerous because they were heated by real fire. And because they were heated by real fire, they were very dangerous. Ad Kedei Kach, the Gemara says that if someone enters the Beis Merchas, you have to say it Tefillah. When you leave the Beis Merchas, you have to say it Tefillah. Anichlas the Beis Merchas, you say Yiratzim Ufanech Hashem L'Kaisha Tatzileni Mizeu Keyoytze Boy. Va'yera Bidvar Kalkola Va'ovim V'yera Bidvar Kalkola Va'ovim Tein Misasi Kapar L'Chal. He literally says Vidui before they enters the Beis Hamerchas. Kinafik Mayomer. What do you say when you leave? I was saved from the fire. Rabbi Vo once entered a bathhouse. And as he was there, the bottom of the bathhouse, it gave out. A miracle happened. He was able to stand on a beam. But the problem is there were other people there as well. Shazif, he was able to save May of the Chad Gafri, 101 people, the Chad Avri, with one of his arms. So Rabbi Vo was saved miraculously, and with one hand, in a daima, trying to pick a he was able to save 101 people with one hand. The Gemara said, "Oh man, as Rabbi Vo standing there, he's holding all these people." He said, "Hi to Rabbi." Now I know what Rabbi said. When you leave the Beis Merchas, you're supposed to say, "But the bottom line is you see, Rabbi Vo was someone that was physically very, very strong. Rabbi Vo was also very, very wealthy. This Gemara Masechta Shabbos Daf Kuf Yud Tes Amud Aleph. The Gemara says Rabbi Vo Havi Yosef Atach Toka Deshina U'Moshe Fnura. The Gemara is talking about how Rabbi Vo used to make Shabbos by himself, and even though he had avodim and Mesharsim, but no, he used to make Shabbos by himself. And when he would, what did he do? He would fan the fire that was going to use to cook the food on Shabbos. And when he would do it, he would sit Atach Toka Deshina. He would sit on a chair that was made of ivory. That was very, very expensive. That's Shabbos Kuf Yud Tes Amud Aleph. Shabbos Kuf Yud Tes Amud Beis. Rabbi Vo have an avdin ba'fuke Shabbat iglo tilsa. Every Matzah Shabbos from Malav Malka, they used to prepare for Rabbi Vo of Duleh, right? Now they were already making it for him, but they would make him an iglo tilsa. That's a third-born calf, which we know the Gemara says in a bunch of places was the most chashav of all meat. And the Gemara says, so all he would eat is a kidney, and he would leave everything else. The Gemara tells a story. Bottom line is, you see, Rabbi Vo was very handsome. Rabbi Vo was very strong. Rabbi Vo was also very, very wealthy. The emes is that Rabbi Vo used all these talents to be a tremendous asking for Klal Yisrael. Many, many, many Gemaras that make this point. Just one that brings it out very, very strongly, a Gemara that we learned recently together, feels like ages ago. Chagiga daf Yud Dalet Amud Aleph. The Gemara over there is talking about an Nesui Panim, someone that's an Nesui Panim, someone that helps the generation. It says the Gemara, Zeshen Noisim Panim L'Doiroi Gavuroi. Someone that because of him the generation has a lot of hana. L'mayla in Shamayim, who would be an example of that could be Reb Chanina ben Doisa. And Lamata would be an example of that. Could go in Avahu be Kesar, like Avahu in the Kesar. Avahu was someone that was able to be piled tremendous issues for Klal Yisrael. How was he able to do it? Because this is who he was. And once you have a little bit of insight into who Avahu was as a person, he was someone that was very, very respected, even by the Ummah Sa'olam. And as a result, he was able to be the Nesui Panim, Reb Chanina ben Doisa. In Lamala is Rabbi Avahu Lamata, to be in the same sentence, Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa. But that was the tremendous koyach that he had. So who is Reb Zeira? Reb Zeira was very, very different. Reb Zeira, there are many, many Gemaras that talk about how frail he was and how not well he was. Just one example. Erev Amud Beis. The Gemara says Reb Zeira ki cholish migirse, when he was so weak, he mamish couldn't learn. So he would sit at the entranceway of Rabbi Yehuda bar Ami. Omar, he said, "Kinafki va'ayli rabbanim." When the rabbanim come in and out, "Ekem mikamai." At least stand off, and then so at least I'm gonna get schar. You know, Reb Zeira was so schwach that he couldn't learn. So he said, "No, I can't learn. It is what it is." But at the same time, even though I can't learn, at least let me get schar for standing up and for giving covet to the Talmidei Chachamim. It's the next best thing. This Gemara Bava Mitzvah. Amud Aleph. The Gemara says Reb Zeira, we know, went from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. So it says the Gemara, Reb Zeira Kisol Arad Yisrael, when he came to Eretz Yisrael, Yosef Meya Tanisa de L'Shtakach Yamara Bavla Mine. He fasted 100 Tanesim that he should forget Talmud Babel. Yosef Meya Chrenais, then he fasted another 100 Tanesim to Lishkov. That Rabbi Elazar b'shnei, that Rabbi Elazar shouldn't die during his lifetime, and then the Yosef Me'achrini fasted another 100 Tanesim to like Nishla Beinura the Gehenim, that he shouldn't ever have Gehenim shouldn't be shoyl to him. The Gemara says that he was so unsure whether he was going to end up being affected by Gehenim that Kol Talsin Yomi every 30 days have a badik nafshe. Shagar Tanura, he would take an oven, Salik V'Yaseh V'Gaveh, he would sit inside and he would try to see whether the fire was going to have any impact on him. Yoim Echad, one time, the Rabbanan, they gave him they looked at him in a funny way. They and his shaykh, his thigh ended up getting burnt, and he became known. The Karele, they used to call him Katan. The Katan, that's why his name was Zeira, Russian small. The Charich Shake that had this singed thigh. But the bottom line is that's who Reb Zeira was. So Reb Zeira is weak. Reb Zeira is frail. Reb Zeira fasted 100 Tanesim, another 100 Tanesim, another 100 Tanesim. He used to sit in an oven. He was once burnt in the oven. As a matter of fact, he even had a nickname. They used to call him a name that was something along these lines. There's another Gemara. The Gemara Mesechtes Nida, Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. The Gemara over there is discussing what happens if a woman has a baby, but the baby looks like a behemoth. Right? The Gemara talks about things like this. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Reb Zeira the following question. According to Reb Meir, that holds that if a woman gives birth to a behemoth, or a baby that looks like a behemoth, it's a Vlad Maya, it's a child. So this is a good Yevamos case. If the father of this baby would be Mekabel Kedushin on behalf of this child, what's the halacha? Is the Kedushin or is it not a Kedushin? The Gemara says, Gemara says, what do you mean? Is there going to be a Nisar Achais Ishtai? If the Kedushin is a Kedushin, this person's not allowed to marry the sister. If the Kedushin is not going to be a Kedushin, then it's not going to be a. So the Gemara has a whole shak with the Tarya, and then finally the Gemara says, Amar Rav Acher bar Yaakov said, who asked this question? Rabbi Yirmiyah asked this question to Reb Zeira. He said, Ad kan hevia Rabbi Yirmiyah Reb Zeira de gichoch v'lo gachech. He said, Rabbi Yirmiyah was trying so hard to make Reb Zeira laugh. He was trying so hard to make him laugh. He said, v'lo gachech. He couldn't get him to budge. He couldn't get him to move. He would not laugh. Rashi says, Rabbi Yomi never really had this shaila. What kind of shaila is this? He wants to know if a woman gives birth to a baby that looks like a behemoth, is there an Isser Achis Ishtai? Seriously? That was the shaila. So why did Rabbi Yomi ask the shaila to Reb Zeira? Because he wanted Reb Zeira to laugh, and he couldn't get Reb Zeira to laugh. If we were in this Gemara, that Reb Zeira was always worried. He would never laugh. This sheds insight into another Gemara. The Gemara Mesechtes Brachos, Daf Lamed Amud Beis. The Gemara says Rabbi Yirmiyah had the Yosef made the Reb Zeira. Rabbi Yirmiyah was once sitting by Reb Zeira. And Reb Zeira saw Rabbi Yirmiyah laughing. He told him, "You're never supposed to be umgesetzt. You're not supposed to laugh. But they told him, I'm wearing tefillin, don't worry, my laughter is not going to bring me chas v'shalom to do any averos because I'm wearing tefillin anyways. But this is Reb Zeira l'shitas. Reb Zeira never laughed. So Reb Yirmiyah is trying to get Reb Zeira to laugh. So he asked him this shiloh because he thought maybe this is something he'd be able to do. The Maratz Chios on this Gemara says a dover nifla. Right here in Masechtas Nida, Daf Chav Dalet. He says, we know that throughout Shas, Reb Yirmiyah is always asking interesting questions. Right? Reb Yirmiyah is always asking these questions. So much so that he once asked the Shaila and he was thrown out of his medrash. But throughout Shas, we know boy Reb Yirmiyah. So Maratz Chios says, you have to hear it inside. Because you have to be the Maratz Chios to say this. He says that it could be. He says, I don't know. But it's possible. For Ulai, Kol HaShailos HaZoros, Asher nimtzu b'Talmud bin Rabbi Yirmiyah, Asher pamecha Yomi Beis Medrash, Kol elu hashaylos hazores hoyu l'sameach as Rabbi Zeira. Rabbi Yirmiyah was a Talmud of Rabbi Zeira, and could be all these questions he asked me l'sameach Rabbi Zeira. Oy shar chacham shoyu atzeidim. He was trying to lift people up, and that's why he used to ask this question. But the bottom line is fascinating, Maratz Chios, which gives us insight into all these Rabbi Yirmiyah's shaylas. But the bottom line is. I mean, every time you have Rabbi Yirmiyah, this is a related Reid Bite in theory, but throughout Shas, literally. But what emerges is that Reb Avahu and Reb Zeira, they were very, very different. Reb Avahu was very, very handsome. Reb Avahu, when they used to serenade him, when he used to walk outside, Reb Avahu was a tremendous gibar. He was a tremendous gvir. He was an askin agadol. He piled tremendous yeshuas with Klal Yisrael. Reb Zeira's hanhaga was very, very different. Reb Zeira was a chayla. He was always fasting. Reb Zeira never smiled. Rabbi Yirmiyah was asking him all these questions. The Maratz Chios says, imagine every boy Reb Zeira was pushing to get Reb Zeira to laugh. It didn't work. And that's this Gemara mean that this was like the Spitz question. Is there achos ish, like someone gives birth to a girl that looks like a man? Like, this was how far he went. Ad kan, the Gemara says, he tried. He couldn't get him to laugh. So they were very, very confused. He says, what's the pshat? It's the Chavis Yor talking. Says the Chavis Yor, what's the pshat? He says, we know there's a Gemara Masechtas Tainis. The Gemara says, Kol hashari b'tainis, nikra chayte, or Kol hashari b'tainis, is a nikra rasha. A nazir. Is a nazir a kaddish or is a nazir a chayte? It was a major machlekes in Shas. He says maybe Rabbi Avahu, his mahalach was he held kol hashari b'tainis as nikra chayte. To the contrary, it can't be shari b'tainis. Rabbi Avahu walked out, he looked handsome. They serenading him. Rabbi Zeira held kol hashari b'tainis as nikra kaddish. He fasted 300 times in one Gemara in Bava Metzia that pei Amud Aleph. But the bottom line is this was the machlekes. These were the two different minhagim. Rabbi Avahu held he was right. Obviously, Rabbi Zeira held that he was right. The Gemara Sanhedrin is telling the story where there was a shayla by Rabbi Zeira and Rabbi Avahu. Rabbi Zeira asked Rabbi Avahu a question. We have a Messiah that ain't davar tamid yarmin Shemayim. But what if a muschamar falls down from Shemayim? Do we look at it as a davar tar? Do we look at it as a davar tamid? Ma, what's the halacha? Amalei. So Rabbi Avahu told Rabbi Zeira, Yarud Nal. He said, Tanin Shaita. This is a question. The klal is ein davar tamei yarim min hashamayim. Zok the Heilige Rashi again. What does it mean yarid nala? Tanin shaita. Oif. It's a bird. Sheshmoi tanin. V'hu shaita. Ubaycha. Umasfit tamid. He's always crying. He's always upset. He's always umgesetzt. He's always hungry. Rabbi Avahu held that Reb Zeira's chasidus, that's what Chavis Yar said, was a bechin of chasid shaita. He held it was wrong. He held it takes away from learning. Reb Zeira was so sick he couldn't learn once. He held it takes away. And therefore he told him, you're nala. He wasn't telling him that you're this oif, that stama shaita. He was handling him. This was a debate that they had. Reb Avahu and Reb Zeira, they knew each other. And Reb Avahu saw the world one way, Reb Zeira saw the world another way. And this is a Melchamta Shal Torah. So he says he took advantage of this opportunity. And it's not Mamash Tzushtal to the Shiloh. But he said he took advantage of this opportunity to tell him what he held. But Chas v'Chalil, he says he was calling him Mamash Shaita. Why would he call him that? Because he asked a question about a chamar, he calls him this foolish animal. But he said because Reb Zeira was someone that was boichel mas betomid. That's something that he did. And he held that in halacha, it wasn't oisgehalten. Because kol hashara b'tainis is not nikra kaddish, he's nikra chayte. And it's the wrong thing to do. And there's a gather of a chassid shaita where someone does chasidus was not oisgah. Now Reb Zeira is a Amayru Polik. He doesn't have to agree with him. But he says that's the machlokes over here. That's why he referred to him in that way. But the bottom line is that there are many Gemaras in Shas where you find this idea where it's very hard to understand the Gemara. Chafetz Chaim felt that a very chashuv and maramaka to understand and have a little bit of better insight is to look in this Chavis Yar and Siman Kuf Nun Beis, and we will end here.